Welcome to Untrained.
Hi, Iris.
Hey, Whitney. Well, we have a special Untrained today. We don't have a guest, but we kind of have a third guest. You're going to talk about that. You had a great idea for today's podcast. We're going to really talk about what untrained means, what it means to us. So let's start that conversation. So who's our third guest here?
In the hot seat today is the idea of untrained, this concept that came to us, that we've been relating to, and that has been relating to us for years now. We're in season 2, and I thought it'd be helpful to get really clear. What do we mean when we say untrained? Because it's evolving all the time. So to prepare for this, I went to our folders. We have lots of Google Drive folders. We have books we came up with. We've got podcast ideas. We've got all sorts of things. But at the very beginning, the word we used a lot was power and ownership. So as performance coaches who have helped people become more powerful, we have an opinion about power and what we mean when we say power and what our clients mean when they say power. And one of the things that we've noticed in ourselves and in them is that maybe the outside looks powerful or the resume is powerful, but internally people are engaged. They've got people-pleasing, perfectionism tendencies, anxiety, self-doubt. They're hiding, they're holding back, they're anxious, they're burdened, they're exhausted. There's all these very unpowerful things going on the inside. But there's a performance of making it look like everything's fine for the sake of power. So that's sort of where I started. And then you and I created our own little untrained cycles that we notice ourselves going in. And then I thought we could talk about all the ways that we've untrained through our journeys, through what we've learned from our guests, and to really hold ourselves up as being mid-untrained and what that looks like.
While you were talking, the one thing that came up to me was we're kind of in a misalignment. We're like a house of cards. So when people get to a point where the outside doesn't feel like it matches the inside, there's a misalignment, right? We get exhausted. Mm-hmm. We might seem successful on the outside, but it doesn't feel that way, or there's no ownership of it, or I don't feel powerful. And that's when people come to us. And also that's how we kind of found each other. We're like, wow, it might look really successful, but I'm so tired, and this is just not the way I want to operate anymore. And the interesting thing, and maybe it is irony, maybe there's a different word for it, is when we let the house of cards, in my mind, kind of reconfigure to a place that's more solid, there's more foundation, the outside matches the inside, it's really when you find your true powerful place.
Yes. So, everything can look the same on the outside, but we can feel dramatically different. Your clients can feel dramatically different on the inside because they've done some alignment work, because they've let go of some things. They've done some untraining and retraining. So we wanted to just talk about what that's looking like these days. And, two other things. When we do our intro, it's like we want to acknowledge that the way things are working aren't working. And that's what we're talking about when we say that it's not working, not by what you see on the outside, although the levels of anxiety and health issues that many women are facing is not okay. But it's how people are feeling on the inside that is unsustainable. How we have been feeling on the inside is not okay and not sustainable. And the other thing that you always used to say, or still say, is that it's like, in this transfer of women sort of out of the home and into the workforce and into these more powerful, I'm using quotations, positions in society, we missed a step. Like there was some untraining and training that, or training that never happened. And I think that when we invite our guests on, we're looking for that training and we're looking to share that training.
Yeah, and I'll add to that there is a societal misstep and a gap, not just for women, right? So we did all the things in the household, Then we had to do all the things outside of the household. Then we had to do all the things all together, right? There was no sort of realigning of relationships. There was no realigning of partnerships. There was no realigning with agreements in the corporate space. But I'd also say it's the same for the men, right? So we had Chinazam on to talk about how men are also evolving into this new space. So, and of course, when we're talking about men and women, it's the cisgender men and women, but I love where we are now, where I think with the shift in how we see gender, the shift in power dynamics, these sort of shifts in hierarchy are really helping us redefine. It's the step we've always missed. And you're right, these untrained guests have all helped us come up with frameworks or scaffolds and tools to help us to bridge that gap.
Yeah. Yeah. And you and I have both been on a journey with internal family systems. And I just want to name that in internal family systems, like the goal of it is to be connected to self. And there's 8 C's of self, which is compassion, curiosity, clarity, creativity, calm, confidence, courage, and connectedness. That's a lot of C's. I'm going to say the ones that stand out to me the most that I think we talk about a lot here: compassion, curiosity, clarity. Okay, I like them all. Creativity, calm, confidence, courage, and feeling connected. So, personally, that's sort of how I define power now. You know, when I feel those things, I feel that like good feeling power versus the like, I got the gig and now I have to present and oh my God, I hope I don't screw it up. But it's a different feeling.
Yeah, I think that it's redefining. One of the untraining mechanisms too is taking what you've been told your whole life about what power is, what success is, and then shifting that. Because, for me, everyone looks at this Olympic title, or I went to Stanford, as a marker of this person must be very successful. But the truth is, in those 2 places are the places that I felt the least successful, the least aligned with myself. So I needed to find, at 43, a better way to define success for myself. And so what it sounds like we're doing is, what does power actually mean to you? And what's your definition of power? And throughout your life, it definitely ebbs and flows, right? So when you're younger, the definition of power is one way. Yeah, you have children, or you don't have children, you have a partner. All these definitions of success, of power, of worthiness, of self, all those things shift and ebb and flow. And we don't often look at those things. So I'm hoping that also our podcast helps people tap into some of that reflection as well, to redefine these words.
Yeah. And if the old definitions aren't feeling right, to feel like that's okay. And we can come up with new definitions, right? I think what always tripped me up earlier in my life is saying, oh, but I checked that box and that box and that box, and I am like desperately not okay. So now what? Right? So there's other now what's out there more and more, which I find really encouraging.
Let's share the cycles, right? Because I think the cycles are also part of that as well. Because one piece of the cycle, so she's going to show something on the screen. So if you're on YouTube, you can see it, but we'll describe it in words for people who are listening on podcasts. But kind of what we've been untraining, both of us have these cycles, and also what we've been told how to go about getting needs met, right? So we had to redefine those things.
So this is taken from I recently wrote a book called Body Image Inside Out with Deb Schachter. I co-wrote it, and it's coming out in October with Sheldon Press. And we, it's a very similar process. Like, we have a process for negative body image. And so I was thinking about this morning, and my cycle around like my professional, trying to achieve this professional success, and how similar it is. So I just grabbed that diagram and I inserted these elements. So Whitney's untrained cycle. So I want to be seen, heard, get my needs met, feel safe, feel a sense of belonging, right? That primary human desire. So if I don't feel that already, culture tells me how to do this, right? The culture I belong to. Get power in the form of money, influence, prestige, praise, right? Being taught that if you look this way, act this way, have these accolades, you'll feel all the things that you want from number one. So then it says the prescription is the way you get that is you work harder, you people please, particularly for women, push hard, focus on future promises. It's out there. Just, if you could just get to it, right? Then you'll get number one. So what do? I push myself. I get the temporary rewards from the culture. And, you and I both you can also get rewards like, oh, you're doing so much. How do you do it? And you're like, I don't. So then 5, eventually, I feel exhausted, anxious, disconnected from myself. Iris has to listen to me say, like, I think I have this terrible ailment. I've just Googled it. My body doesn't feel healthy. Something feels desperately wrong. And either physically or mentally, I crash. And then I think, how am I going to get out of this? I don't like to feel this way. Da, 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 da. I think, oh, I know. I'll go back to 2 and 3. I know how to get this. I know how to make all this pain go away. And I start all over again. And around and around and around we go. And I will say, like, I've been in therapy for years. I've done my own coaching for years. There's been healing going on for years. And so this cycle gets diluted, right? That it shifts, but there's still something core to this cycle that happens for me when I get stressed, when the rubber really meets the road. So it's really helpful to articulate it for myself. And, I see forms of this in my clients as well on their journey. So you've watched me on this journey. You may know my cycles better than that I do. Do you want to comment or say anything before we look at yours?
Yeah, I think also one part of that cycle too is if I do certain things a certain way, then if I hide some things, meaning you have corporate Whitney, right? So also it's like, okay, well, in order for me to get the influence, prestige, and praise that I think I should have, I need to morph myself or chameleon myself into something that looks like success. So you do corporate Whitney. And it's really interesting because in the last the last year, I've been trying to encourage, and I know you have a unicorn over there, more of this like more of an alignment with who you are, right? Because you have a very spiritual side, you have a very soft side. It's not corporate Whitney. You're very you feel the world, right? Like you have all these emotions. You're very tapped into that. So your greatest intuitions and your greatest feelings, you'll often override because you're like, no, because I've got to not think about those things because success looks like it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit.
It's not corporate.
It's not corporate. If I just was more corporate. But the funny thing is that your success is centered around your alignment with who you really are.
Yes. And that's the paradox. Like all great things in life are a paradox, right? The paradox is that when I am connected to myself, when, the unicorn gets to come out, to be fair, I did wear a unicorn costume for one of our guests, the awkward one, because it felt aligned. When I take care of myself, when I am aligned with myself, then I feel all the fruits of number one. I feel more of the things that I actually want. And, just go back to the IFS language, the idea that corporate Whitney or these push harder Whitneys, they're these manager parts that adapted long ago to try and help me get everything in number one. Get me feel seen, my needs met, feel safe, feel a sense of belonging. And that as I get to know them better and I can tend to them and nurture them and care for them, they don't have to work so hard. And more of the C's we were talking about, that courage, and external resources. I think also in the book, we talk about them as, as relational mirrors, right? Having people who see us and love us, like you're a wonderful relational mirror for me, and says like, bring out the unicorn, Whitney, it's going to be okay. Or like, play that drum, it's all going to be okay. That's part of it too, that we don't have to summon it all from inside of ourselves, that we can cultivate environments and networks and people that will also nurture that truer, more aligned self. So thank you for everything you said. You want to add anything?
Can you, for the audience that might not know what IFS stands for, can you give a little spiel?
Yeah, and I'm going to stop sharing. So Internal Family Systems, created by Dick Schwartz. It's one of the fastest growing modalities in the world right now. And it centers around the idea that we are born with all of these parts, and that when we experience challenges in our early upbringing, they step in to help us feel safe, to help us manage the situation. And we might label those parts as bad, an addiction, for example, or something that ends up getting us in trouble. But they're just trying to help us. And that in the heart of all of us, no matter what we've been through, we have what's called self-energy. And Dick Schwartz uses the metaphor of like, it's like the sun, right? It's just always there. Even if there's clouds, even if there's storms, it's always there. And the point of it all is to connect to that self energy and know when we're coming from our parts energy, and know how to better connect to them and resource them so they don't need to work so hard, right? So corporate Whitney is a manager part of mine. That's like, oh, the stakes are high. Okay, get the blazer out, button up, get out the pearl earrings. Like, this is what you need to look like to fit in. And don't say anything unless you absolutely know it's true, and try and figure everything out and get rigid and stiff and tight and cross your fingers, right? Manager part.
What I've liked most, and Whitney introduced me to IFS, working with the person I'm working with, I love the idea of the compassion piece of it, where you're not seeing parts of yourself as bad, but you're really giving those parts some compassion. I was just talking to someone about that. Is I've become, and I said it to Mandy the last time, is like ruthlessly compassionate with myself, and really giving myself the room and space to make mistakes, to be okay if these parts kind of show up. So with the cycle, just to go back to it, for me, there'll be triggers of experiences.
Shall I? Do you want to go back to mine, or shall
Iris's cycle? So
we have it here.
Yes, we'll bring up Iris's cycle and we'll walk through it. But you know, there's not a ton that's different, but there are some pieces of it informed by my training as a youth in sports, and I've talked about the coach that I had, and you know, I think it's really interesting about the cycle too. So for me, I'm good a lot of the time, but then there can be moments or situations that trigger this cycle. And I will recognize, so one of the things I wanted to say was, you know, I'll recognize along the cycle of steps that, oh my gosh, I'm in a cycle. So it might not be until step 7 sometimes, or it might not be, sometimes it might be at step 2. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I'm trying to tap into a place that's not really useful or helpful for me at this point, and I need to retrain. So I think the compassion comes in when you're untraining, knowing that you're going to take one step forward and you're going to take 2 steps back, sometimes 5. And I'll say, like, sometimes I would get frustrated with myself, but I think now at this point, I think about, you know, I am going to go take a couple steps backwards. Sometimes I'm not going to recognize I'm in a cycle until step 7. And I have all these resources, but sometimes it's just not going, I'm not going to tap into those resources until it's too late. And not too late, but down the cycle a little bit more. And that's okay. It's not like we're trying to untrain to a place where we reach the height of the mountain. And recently, was Scott Barry Kaufman's work too, Transcend. He talks about that too, and upending Maslow's theory that it wasn't meant to be a triangle where we like kind of move up this triangle or move up the ladder, but it's more like throughout your life. The way I've distilled it is throughout your life, you're always working on yourself, and the fact that you're just working on yourself and giving yourself the room to do that, to just take one step forward, maybe 5 steps back or 3 steps back. But the truth is you're always trying to move it forward. And Whitney, that's one of the things I see in you all the time is you're always trying to move forward, right? So you might take a couple steps back, but you're always looking to see, like, can I just take another step forward? Because that's the journey, right? Being a human is really, really friggin' messy. And I think that allowing that messiness and knowing that it's not a destination or at the end we have to reach enlightenment like Buddha. We are just literally taking these small steps. My mother often says, and she's a Buddhist, she's like, every lifetime that you have is an opportunity to get a little bit closer to this place. It's not about happiness, right? We're not trying to get to a happy place. We're trying to be good human beings to make positive impacts in this world. And every lifetime is an opportunity to get a little bit closer, a little bit closer. So
takes the pressure off.
It does, doesn't it? Like, gosh, just subscribe to that just for that fact. But that's what I think about these untrained cycles. Like I have this cycle and I'm 43. I still go into the cycle, but each time I get a little bit better. So my cycle is I have the same. I have these deep needs, the Maslow needs, right? Like I want to be seen. Human needs. I want to be seen. I want to get my needs met. I want to feel safe. Belonging is a big piece for me too, being an immigrant kid. Just feeling a sense of belonging, part of a group, and also like always kind of feeling like I just always felt separate or other. So culture tells me, right? So that's the second part that Whitney talks about is if you get money, influence, prestige, praise, all of those things, those are going to get you to where you want to be. And so the way I learned to do it is, well, let me just please everybody around me and do the things that they want me to do so that I can get the praise. But let's make sure that there's some perfection around it, because I was taught, like, if you're not perfect, then it's not worth doing. Or if it's not perfect, then I actually got punishment for that. So it was actually like fear-based and unsafe.
And I'll bring in like our last episode with Amanda, like the culture of fencing, the culture of sport sort of wired that into you. If I don't get it perfect, then I'm going to be punished, and then I'm going to be ostracized and I don't belong. So there was layers of this depending on which cultures you're a part of as you grow up.
Exactly. So, and I was well rewarded, right? So I world champion, making Olympic teams. So on the outside,
17 magazine, photo shoot, come on.
Yeah, those were all great, right? And I wouldn't say, looking back, would I give all that up? It was great. And it could have been done in a way that wasn't deficit, right? Based in deficit. It could have been done in a way that was healthier, where the drive wasn't from a place of not enough. And so after all this people pleasing, the next step of that is feeling tired, discouraged. And then also realizing, and this is newer for me, is realizing like it actually continues to put money in the bank of not enough, because I already feel like I'm not enough. I have a ton of imposter syndrome.
Reinforcing.
It reinforces it. And then not only that, it makes the debt even more, right? Because you're not ever aligned to yourself. So you're always not enough. And then moving on to, okay, maybe I need a credential. Maybe I need something else so that people will pay attention or give me some praise. And then you start over again. So this is all to say, I'm sure many of you guys that are listening can relate to some of these parts. And I would say, and we can take that down too. We're showing my Untrained cycle. You want to say something?
Yeah, right. Don't you feel like you took your clothes off? That's what I feel like when mine's
Do I feel
up there.
naked?
Yeah, I felt a little naked when mine was up there. But I just want to say, I think we both or a lot of the times people come for coaching, right? Is eventually I feel exhausted, discouraged, not enough, right? Something there. And then for you, the interesting thing is, I literally used to draw this out for you. You're like, and then Iris thinks she needs another credential, because you'd be like, maybe I need my PhD. Maybe I want to go back and get a certification for human resource. Like there was, I'm like, Iris, you're cuckoo, crazy pants. You do not need, nor do you have time for, right? But that's sort of one of your unique things. And I think, we will have a way for you to get a blank one of these so that you can really start to be curious about like, what is my cycle? And again, to Dr. Amanda Blake, we had her on last time, like surfacing the invisibles. When we can surface the patterns that were once invisible, that were just sort of part of our being, of our neural pathways, then we can say, ooh, I don't know if I want to keep doing this again. And we're saying you have choices. There are options out there. You do not need to keep doing this. So I'm going to stop share and you can continue, Iris.
I think it's important to say, I was saying this, I think this morning to somebody, having coffee early this morning. You know how I like to get up early, with one of my CrossFit friends, and just saying that sometimes it works, right? So this cycle for a very, very long time made me very successful outwardly. And there is a point, I think, in your 30s and where you're like, this feels uncomfortable and something needs to shift. So I think we've said this before too, is there are points in your life where you need to kind of evaluate these systems that are ingrained to see whether or not they are continuing to serve you. Because for me, if I continue down this pathway, it's not just that I feel sad or I'm more depressed. It's literally, I have a lot of panic attacks. I have really high blood pressure. I mean, there are physiological effects that come into play at 43 that weren't there when I was younger. If I don't shift, right, this overwork, this need to be perfect, I will hit a wall, either medically, physically, mentally,
well, and you
emotionally.
have hit them at times. We both have hit some walls, right? You've been in the ER for blood pressure or panic attack reasons. I can't remember, right? But that was stress induced. Yeah. All the reasons. Yeah. And I've definitely hit the wall many times. And I think that, this is why so much of what we talk about is body oriented, and why so many of our guests are focusing on the body, because again, it's the duck, right? You could look fine on the outside, but the feet are running, but it's the body that ends up holding the difference, right? Between what we see on the outside, what we feel on the inside. It's holding all the stress of people pleasing, of the exhaustion, of hiding, of feeling misaligned, whatever it is. Do you want to say more about that?
No, I think that's exactly. So I think we're at a point now where we've talked about where we've started and the evolution of it. Because we also, I'm so glad you talked about your book. This is the first time you've really said all the things about your book. And your body self is part of this evolution of untraining, of knowing what's the role the body plays as you're untraining, as you're going through these things. What is the toll? What part does it play? And I think that's one thing where I want to go to, is thinking about what's the future of Untrained? Where do we see now? How are we continuing to elevate our thought process on Untrained? And where do we think this process might go, right? So you and I started with this power element. We've started with, this kind of doesn't feel right. We started to kind of dive deeper. We've brought people onto the show to help us dive a little deeper into different concepts. You're bringing in body self. I think about somatic coaching a lot. What does the nervous system have to do with this? What is the interplay, mind, body, spirit? Right? So I think that's also part of the future. So I'd love to hear where you are today with this thought process, this evolution, and where we might go from here.
Yeah. Well, I didn't think you and I have talked about where we might go of really further exploring like this intersection of all that we've talked about and the body. And really, just like we did last time with people who were engaged in intense cultures growing up, whether it's athletic or maybe some other performance based, and how that shaped their neural pathways, their wiring, and what it looks like for them to untrain it. So getting really curious about with other people, just like we did today, about what are your patterns? And now that you see them, what are your options? What are your choices? How do you live with more alignment, with more resourcing, and in a very different way? So continuing that exploration. And I would say, the body self, body image inside out, the book that I co-authored with Deb Schachter is really about, just that, like surfacing the invisibles, saying, if we come out of the hate it, fix it cycle, and we get curious and we go in and we see how our body image parts have been serving us, and we start to listen to our bodies because maybe they know something really important about us because heck, they've been with us our entire lives, then it can serve us in our own alignment, in the life that will feel good to us. So, because as we know, we can look good on the outside and have a shitty body image, right? You can look good on the outside and have great body image in the morning. Something happens, your nervous system, your emotions feel differently, and terrible body image in the evening. And we know your body can't change in that amount of time, right? So I was just I was listening to Kate Northrup talking about her money approach, wide receiver, and she's talking about the nervous system in relationship to money. So people are starting to have very different conversations, starting to really change the conversation about it's not just push, work harder, stress more to get these things. That's not actually getting many of us what we want on a deeper level. What do you think about the future of Untrained and what this conversation means?
Yeah, so just to give the audience a little bit of like heads up for next season, we've really been toying with the idea of leaning into the perspective of the athlete, or athletes that are transitioning from or have transitioned out of professional athletics into what I like to call normie life, because I think there's a lot to learn there. Because we always look at these athletes, Olympians, they've got it. They know how to do these things, and they're probably really equipped to be successful everywhere. But I think they're nuggets of yes, and they're nuggets of like yes, and they probably can teach us about how we maybe grind too hard, or maybe rest and recovery we might be better suited for some of that. So I like the idea that we're going to continue to evolve the Untrained. So I think our entree in for a lot of people into the concept of Untrained and of coaching is to start in a very cerebral way, right? Because we're always in our heads about everything. So we start in that way as an entree point. Then as we evolve with our clients, and also as we evolved in Untrained, as you said, we're now going to say, look, like there's actual science behind tapping into the wisdom of your body. So let's not just stop at your head, but explore what the whole body can intuit for us and help us do and help us untrain. So we're going to add that. And I hope we get to a point where we tap into your priestess side, right? Where we really talk about what does this actually mean in the bigger picture, right? And I know this might scare some people out in the universe, but we had Dr. Ellen Vora say that her next book is going to be about magic. I think there's a real misalignment if we don't talk about that in the future episodes of what does this mean for us as humans, and by magic, in this bigger picture.
By magic we mean things we can't always explain with our heads.
Yes. So it's beyond, right? So it's not just going to be about this cerebral piece, the body piece, but also our relationship to the world, the universe around us. And I promise we won't get weird about it. But I do think
Iris won't let us.
I won't let you get weird about it because I'm not going to go there. But I do think there's an element of that because I think so many of us are looking for that, right? So maybe I'm biased towards it, but I think we are looking for why do I matter in this bigger picture? So what if I work on myself? Okay, I feel better. But what does that actually mean in context to the people around us, to the world around us, to the things that are happening? We cannot ignore that there's a lot happening around us.
There's a lot of transition.
Always. Yeah.
Right. But we are in a particularly intense period of transition, transformation, destruction in our world.
Yeah.
Rebuilding.
So I hope that's where we go. Anything else to add so do you think we defined untrained? I don't think we've actually said what that is. We kind of talked about it.
Take a stab at it, Iris. Go for it.
Jeez. I think maybe the audience can also write in and help us too.
Yeah. Maybe if you come up with the tagline, you're our next podcast guest.
Exactly. Hey, that's exactly it. If you can help us with your Untraining tagline, then you can be our next guest. We'd love to talk to you and how you got there. I think we're to take the concept of the bigness that I feel right now is there is a transformation that is happening, the human's purposefulness in this world. And I think the old thought processes we had, the securities we had, what we thought to be true, didn't serve us as well as we thought. And we need to be more agile, more functional. And so now we're in a place where we have to take some of those truths and untruths, sift through them, and make them realities for ourselves and the people around us. So I think that's what Untrained really is what's true, what's untrue, what is healthy, what's not so healthy, what's serving us, what's not serving us. Now.
So when you're talking identifying our untruths, so identifying untrained, identifying our untruths and retraining through practical and creative resources for a good life.
Exactly.
Something like that.
Exactly, because you doing your best and you being at your best and living your life will in turn be impactful to others. Yeah.
I would change it to a life that feels good.
The life not just one that's good.
A life that feels good, not just one that looks good. And, just to finish the loop, you want to invite my drumming unicorn energy, and I want to invite your a goofy, extra energy that's been coming out a little bit more.
This was a great conversation to see where we've come and where we're going, and we hope you all enjoyed it too.
One more thing.
Yes.
One more thing that we're introducing. We're introducing the worksheet. So for each episode, we will introduce a worksheet that has just sort of like we did, but with fill in the blanks. Like when I blah, 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 I used to blah, 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 and what I'd like to do is blah, 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 right? So it's just a worksheet you can download to really practice surfacing your own invisibles and your own retraining. So it will be linked to our YouTube channel notes.
Yes. So more information about that. Well, what do we say at the end of every episode, Whitney?
Keep untraining.
So keep untraining. And if you like the content that you hear, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Whitney has a dancing unicorn up on the YouTube channel, so hopefully you see us there. Also, anywhere you get your podcast, please subscribe and be part of our tribe of Untrained. So until next time, keep untraining.